Yeah, so how do I feel about medical debt? Basically, some medical debt not being reported on credit scores, right? Or credit reports. I think it's a great thing. You know, if you go back to kind of the idea of what gets reported on a credit report, just to give everybody a little bit of understanding, what happens is you go in for a medical procedure, you go in because of a medical emergency. The hospital is not equipped to deal with bills. That's not what they're there for. They're there to try to help people heal, right? So for a long time, pretty much immediately, they would sell the debt to some sort of collections, financial services company to deal with because they don't have people to go and call, pick up the phone. If you have ever dealt in medical debt, like when you call the billing department, it's some third-party call center that has no affiliation back. They don't even know the phone numbers to call back to the hospital half the time in general. So that's kind of the history of how medical billing has kind of happened is the hospital bills, when they're like, oh, we got to go and get money, they sell it off to somebody else, right? And so those are the phone calls that you tend to get. The problem with that, though, is, and I think a lot of financial institutions, to be fair, recognize that medical debt, medical credit, medical items that go into collections typically are out of your control. So when you think about if you've ever applied for a loan and when an underwriter, when they're trying to decide on whether they want to approve you for a loan or not, medical debt is one of the last things that they would always look at. But the problem is, you know, with more and more medical bills kind of accruing, it started to impact our credit scores more and more over the last decades. So what has happened is the government has jumped in, the credit bureaus have stepped up and said, hey, if there's an item that you had that was a medical bill that went into collections and you paid it off, we will no longer go ahead and report that on your credit report. It doesn't change the fact that if you have an item that is in collections today, in July of 2022, that item is not going to show up on your credit report. But what they have done is eliminated the item where it's been paid off or taken care of. It will no longer show up on your credit report. The second important thing that they've done is the federal government has jumped in and said, hey, instead of you being able to report an item to your credit report within 6 months of it going into collection, if it's a medical bill, now it has to wait a year to actually be reported back to your credit report. So that's significant because now it allows people to be informed because oftentimes they don't realize that they have a bill that's outstanding, right, in general. So they're kind of, the surprise hits when it's a year later and they're applying for that auto loan or that home loan and they're like, hey, I have this item in collections. And they're like, I have what in collections? And they don't realize it. So now it gives them a little bit more time to actually go ahead and resolve that issue in general. I would say the third most significant thing, and I think this is very, very important, is this, that starting in 2023, so first half of 2023, if your medical bill is less than $500 in total accrued amount that you owe, it cannot be reported to the credit bureaus. So that's significant because the number one cause of items in collections is medical debt, right? So now the fact that something under $500 cannot be reported to the credit bureaus is significant because it's going to really have an impact on people's credit reports in general and their credit scores in general. Now, the important thing to remember there is you still have an obligation to pay that debt back. So collection companies can still, you know, come after you. When I say come after you, try to reach out to you, garnish wages, file lawsuits. Now, are they likely to do it with $500? Probably not. But the reality is now you don't have that weight kind of holding you back because it's less than $500 starting in 2023.